The diner smelled of burnt coffee and rain-soaked leather. Outside, a cold November wind rattled the neon sign, casting fractured light across the empty parking lot. Inside, Marcy Blake, 24, apron damp from wiping down the counter, froze when the bell above the door jingled sharply. He walked in like a shadow, boots heavy on the linoleum, leather jacket scuffed, face lined with scars that told more stories than words ever could. A Hell's Angel. No mistaking him. His name was Colt Ironjaw Hayes. He slid into a corner booth, eyes scanning the room like he was expecting trouble. And in that moment, Marcy noticed something strange, something that made her stomach twist. Behind Colt, crouched in the shadows of the diner's kitchen doorway, a man was rifling through a Waitress station. His gloved hands moved fast, almost frantic. Marcy could see a small envelope fall to the floor, something Colt hadn't noticed yet. Her instincts screamed. She had seen bikers get crossed before. She had seen loyalty cut like knives. And she had just stumbled onto something dangerous. Don't talk, Colt muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing, staring at the man. Marcy's heartbeat thumped in her chest. She knew then, if she spoke, everything could go wrong. Every life in that diner could unravel in seconds. The man turned abruptly, sensing he'd been caught. Colt's fist slammed on the table before he even stood, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the empty diner. Marcy stepped between them, apron in hand, trembling. Wait. Stop. Please. Colt's gaze locked onto hers. A warning in his eyes. Silent. Lethal. Unyielding. I said, don't talk, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. But there was something else too, a hint of desperation, a shadow behind the anger. The stranger tried to bolt, but Colt moved faster than she could follow, grabbing him by the collar and throwing him against the wall. The envelope fell, spilling its contents, photographs, documents, and something else, a small key, glinting in the flickering fluorescent light. Marcy knew, instinctively, that key was the reason Colt had come in tonight, and that whatever she did next could either save him, or destroy everyone in the diner. She swallowed hard, heart pounding. Her choice was simple, act, or stay silent. And as Colt's piercing eyes flicked to her, she made it. Marcy's hands shook as she reached for a rag, pretending to wipe the counter, while every nerve in her body screamed danger. Colt leaned back in the booth, breathing hard, eyes still fixed on the man he had slammed against the wall. The stranger groaned, clutching his side, and Marcy realized he wasn't just a thief, he was here for something far worse. The diner's neon lights flickered, casting broken shadows across Colt's leather jacket. Rain slid down the windowpane behind him, streaking the glass like tears on a face Marcy would never forget. His eyes softened for a moment, scanning the room as if gauging the risk to anyone else. Marcy swallowed and forced herself to speak. I saw what he dropped. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The envelope, the key. Colt's eyes snapped to hers. The warning there burned hotter than before. You shouldn't be involved, he said, voice rough, layered with something almost human. This isn't a game. I know, she whispered back. But if you're in danger, you need help. I can't just stand here. Colt's jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, she saw the weight of everything he carried, the scars, the reputation, the enemies that shadowed his every step. He had fought battles she could only imagine, and yet here he was, vulnerable in the neon glow of a late-night diner. The stranger scrambled to his feet, clutching a crumpled photograph from the envelope. You won't stop me, he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty room. Colt didn't answer. He moved with precision, catching the man by the wrist and twisting him around until he dropped the photo. The envelope slid across the floor, and Marcy's heart leapt. She realized the stakes weren't just Colt's life, they were about to become part of a much larger, darker game. Ryder, no, Colt's name was Ironjaw, not a man to be underestimated. Yet he was watching her now, reading her intentions, gauging whether she was friend or liability. Marcy forced herself to stay calm, crouching low to pick up the envelope. Her fingers brushed against the photographs, faces she didn't recognize, names scrawled in neat handwriting, and something that made her stomach tighten, a map, a small address marked in red. Colt's gaze flicked from her hands to the street outside. They'll come tonight. The ones who sent him. You understand that? Yes, Marcy said, steadying her voice. I understand. The stranger groaned again, trying to lunge at them. Colt caught him by the collar, yanking him down into a chair. Not another step, he growled. Marcy realized then, she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a witness, a protector, and perhaps the only person who could keep Colt alive long enough to confront what was coming. The rain outside intensified, tapping a frantic rhythm against the diner's roof. Neon lights cast jagged reflections across the wet floor, the envelope, and the two men locked in a tense standoff. Every second stretched, thick with the weight of secrets and imminent danger. Marcy took a deep breath. Her choice had been made, she would act. And now, there was no turning back. The stranger's eyes darted wildly, sweat mixing with rainwater dripping from his jacket hood. He realized too late that Colt wasn't just a man, he was a force with a past built on loyalty, violence, and survival. Every muscle in Colt's body was coiled like steel, ready to strike, but restrained by a principle he carried deeper than anger: he never killed without reason. Marcy stood frozen behind the counter, clutching the envelope to her chest. Her knuckles whitened, her heart hammering in her ears. Every instinct told her to run, but her conscience refused. She had seen the fear in Colt's eyes as much as she had seen it in the stranger's, and she understood that if she didn't act, someone would die tonight. "You're not going anywhere," Colt said, voice calm but cutting through the tension like a knife. His hand moved with precision, keeping the stranger pinned against the seat. "Not until I know what you're after. Not until I know who sent you." The stranger gasped, sweat dripping from his temples. You don't understand. It's bigger than you think." Colt's eyes narrowed. "Everything is bigger than me, buddy. But tonight, it's smaller than you. And that envelope tells me all I need to know." Marcy edged closer, glancing at the scattered contents on the floor. Maps, photographs, and a small key glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. She realized that the stranger's intentions weren't just theft, they were a threat to the biker's life, and potentially lives beyond the diner. Colt's leather-clad fingers snatched the key from the floor. "This opens a lot of doors," he said, voice low. "Doors that some people die trying to cross. And you," he jabbed a finger at the stranger. "You're lucky I don't leave you out there in the rain." The man tried to lunge, but Colt's reflexes were lightning fast. He twisted the stranger into the floor with controlled force, just enough to subdue but not to harm permanently. Marcy flinched at the sight, but she also felt a surge of awe. This was a man who lived by rules she couldn't yet understand, a man who protected and punished in equal measure. "Marcy," Colt said suddenly, voice softer, almost vulnerable, "you need to leave this counter. I don't want anyone hurt." She nodded, stepping behind the kitchen wall, heart racing. From there, she watched as Colt interrogated the man silently. Every gesture, every movement was calculated. There was no room for hesitation. The diner had become a battlefield, and Colt was both general and soldier. Then the stranger muttered something that made Marcy's stomach twist. They'll come for you. All of you. Tonight. The whole crew." Colt's head snapped up, eyes blazing. "Then we prepare. And you." He turned to her, voice sharp again. "Stay close. One wrong move and this is over for both of us." Marcy's throat tightened, but she nodded. She realized, with a shiver, that she had stepped into a world she didn't fully understand. A world of bikers, brotherhood, and consequences that reached far beyond any diner's neon glow. The storm outside grew louder, as if echoing the storm building inside the diner. And in that moment, Marcy understood the truth. The night had just begun, and survival would demand courage she wasn't sure she possessed yet. The rain outside hammered the diner with a relentless rhythm, each droplet sounding like a warning, a countdown. Inside, Colt Ironjaw Hayes moved with a predator's precision, his leather jacket soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes like molten steel. Marcy Blake pressed herself behind the counter, the envelope clutched against her chest as if it were a lifeline. Her apron was damp, her palms trembling, but her mind was sharp. She knew that tonight, even the smallest hesitation could mean disaster. The stranger, still pinned by Colt's iron grip, tried to squirm free, but it was useless. Every movement he made only tightened the coil of tension in the room. Colt's eyes didn't leave him. He was studying, analyzing, reading every twitch, every shift, as though he could see straight into the man's intentions. "You think this is a game?" Colt said, his voice low and dangerous, yet not without control. "You think you can sneak into my world, threaten me, and walk away? Not tonight. Not ever." The stranger's eyes flicked to Marcy, panic rising. She doesn't belong in this. Leave her out of it." Colt's gaze snapped to her. There was a flicker of something almost human in his eyes, a protective instinct, raw and uncompromising. "She's part of it now," he said, voice quieter, yet every word carried weight. "Because she's seen too much. And I don't leave witnesses behind." Marcy's stomach clenched, but she understood. This wasn't about power or intimidation. This was survival. And, in some strange, unspoken way, it was about trust. She trusted him because she had no choice, and she trusted herself because she couldn't run anymore. The stranger groaned, then spat on the floor, defiance crumbling into desperation. "You don't know what you're dealing with. They're coming. The crew. They'll burn this place down." Colt's fists clenched, veins visible beneath soaked leather. He didn't flinch. "Then let them try," he said, almost a whisper, though the intensity in the room made it roar louder than the rain outside. "Tonight, they learn what happens when they threaten me. And me alone isn't the problem. Me with my people is the end of the line." The diner felt smaller suddenly, walls closing in with the pressure of tension. Marcy could feel it in her chest, in the way her ribs pressed against her arms as she gripped the envelope. She noticed the kitchen knives glinting, the tables slick with rainwater tracked in from the entrance, and the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. Every sensory detail heightened her awareness. She had to stay calm, stay smart, or everything could unravel. Colt's hand moved toward the envelope, flipping it open to reveal the photographs and documents inside. Maps, faces, addresses, and coded messages. Marcy realized then the scope of the danger. This wasn't just some random thief. This was organized, methodical, and deadly. And now, by stepping in, she had become a part of it. "Marcy," Colt said suddenly, voice low but commanding, "I need you to stay behind me. No heroics. Not tonight. I protect people differently, the wrong step, and we both end up broken." Her throat went dry, but she nodded. Every instinct screamed to flee, but another part, the part that had always hated seeing injustice, held her in place. She could feel the storm outside mirroring the one inside the diner. Thunder rattled the roof. Rain streaked the windows. And in that chaos, a fragile alliance had been forged. The stranger tried to crawl toward the door, sensing some chance of escape. Colt's eyes narrowed, movement fluid and terrifyingly fast. He intercepted, grabbing the man by the collar, lifting him effortlessly, and slamming him back into the wall. Photographs scattered across the floor. Marcy instinctively moved to gather them, but Colt's sharp gaze stopped her. "Not yet," he said. "Everything stays where it is. We need the evidence intact." Marcy swallowed hard, nodding. Her heartbeat thumped against her ribs, loud enough she feared it might echo across the room. She realized that the diner was no longer just a place to serve coffee and pie. It had become a battlefield, a fortress, and a stage for truths that could not remain hidden. And then she saw it, outside, in the rain, shadows moving fast, vehicles approaching, silhouettes unmistakable. Colt noticed first, a hand on his gun holster, eyes scanning the windows, every muscle taut like a coiled spring. The crew was coming. And the storm was breaking. The diner's neon sign flickered violently, casting fractured light across Colt's wet, determined face. Marcy realized with a shiver, tonight, no one would walk away the same. The shadows outside the diner grew larger as headlights cut through the rain-soaked night. Colt's eyes flicked to every movement, every ripple in the darkness. The approaching motorcycles weren't alone. He recognized the insignia instantly. The Black Vultures, a crew known for their brutality, were rolling in, their engines growling like predators circling a cornered prey. Marcy's fingers tightened around the envelope. She pressed herself against the counter, heart hammering like a war drum. She had never seen anything like this, the sheer force of men on chrome, riding with precision, coordinated like a single organism. And yet, through the fear, a strange sense of awe surfaced. These bikers, including Colt, were warriors in a world most people couldn't survive. The diner's door rattled as the first raindrops blew inside from the wind. Colt moved to position himself between Marcy and the windows, his leather jacket plastered to his skin, every muscle alert. Torch-like headlights flashed across the room as the Black Vultures stopped outside, their engines cutting off with a synchronized hiss, leaving an eerie silence that hung heavier than the storm itself. "They're here," Colt muttered, voice barely audible but sharp enough to slice through the tension. Marcy's stomach churned. What do we do?" Colt's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "We survive. And we make sure she gets out safe." From outside, the unmistakable sound of boots hitting wet asphalt signaled that some members had dismounted. Rain dripped from the edge of the roof as Colt and Marcy watched, every second stretching longer, taut with anticipation. The stranger, still tied to the chair, squirmed, realizing now that he had misjudged the situation completely. The first Black Vulture stepped to the door, knocking firmly. "Colt Hayes. We know you've got it. Hand it over, or..." His voice trailed off, swallowed by the night, but the threat was clear. Colt's jaw tightened. "Or what?" he asked, stepping slightly forward, voice low, calm, and deadly. "You want to come in and find out?" Another member, taller, heavier, cracked his knuckles, eyes glinting with malice. "We've been sent to collect. That envelope, the information inside, it belongs to us now. You won't make it out alive if you resist." Colt's gaze swept the diner, every chair, every countertop, every potential cover point. His mind raced, calculating, predicting movements. But there was one thing that remained constant: Marcy. The girl had been thrown into this world of violence unwillingly, yet she was alert, ready to act if needed, and more importantly, alive. He stepped closer to the stranger, voice low, a warning laced with steel. "You're lucky they arrived now, or you'd be on the floor instead of sitting in that chair. Don't even think about moving again." The Black Vultures tested the diner's threshold, tapping the windows, peering inside. Colt didn't flinch. Not one step. Not one motion betrayed fear. The envelope sat on the counter, Marcy's hands hovering above it like a guardian angel's. A sudden thunderclap rattled the roof, and in that instant, Colt sprang into action. The diner became a blur of movement. Chairs slid as barricades. Colt's fists connected with anyone who tried to break in. The stranger's attempt to flee was cut short as Colt swept him down, holding him in place. Marcy ducked behind the counter, breath shallow, as Colt moved fluidly between the incoming threat and her safety. The Black Vultures, confident until now, were taken aback by his ferocity, by the precision of every punch, kick, and movement. This wasn't a fight for ego, this was survival. A protector defending the innocent at all costs. Outside, the rain intensified, masking sounds, but Colt could feel every motion. He knew where they would strike next, anticipating, countering. Each biker outside who attempted to flank him was met with a calculated obstacle. Chairs slammed, boots planted, shadows moving with him like extensions of his will. And through it all, Marcy watched, heart hammering, fear giving way to awe. She realized this was more than a man defending himself. This was someone protecting a life that wasn't even his by blood, but by choice. Colt's strength wasn't in his fists alone. It was in his unwavering resolve, his code, his moral center. The storm outside, the engines, the rain, the screaming wind, all of it blended into a singular moment of tension and cinematic chaos. Colt's eyes flicked back at Marcy. "Stay behind me. One wrong move, and I swear, His words trailed into the pounding rain, the unspoken promise clear. Marcy nodded, gripping the envelope tighter than ever, and in that instant, she understood. This night would change everything. And Colt. Colt would either survive it all, or the world outside the diner would finally learn what happens when someone like him fights for justice. The diner's neon lights flickered violently, throwing jagged shadows across the rain-streaked floors. Colt Iron Jaw Hayes' eyes swept the room, calculating, anticipating. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every droplet of rain outside like a drumbeat of impending chaos. Marcy pressed herself behind the counter, clutching the envelope so tightly her knuckles ached. She felt the electric tension in the air, a storm of violence about to break. Outside, the Black Vulture's engines revved again, a growling menace. They weren't just waiting, they were strategizing. Colt knew this wasn't just a robbery or a theft. This was a hunt. They had come for him, for the envelope, for the information it carried. And they would not leave without blood. Colt's stance shifted, broad shoulders squared, fists loose but ready. His eyes flicked to Marcy. "Stay low. Don't speak. Not until I tell you." The stranger, pinned helplessly in the chair, muttered, You can't stop them all." Colt's gaze hardened. "Try me." The first vulture smashed the diner door with a metal crowbar, and the glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Rain poured in with the cold night air, and the wind carried the faint smell of gasoline and wet leather. Colt moved like a predator, intercepting the man before he could step inside fully, knocking the weapon aside with a flick of his forearm. The room was chaos, tables overturned, chairs sliding, the floor slick with rainwater and sweat. Marcy ducked behind the counter, eyes wide, heart hammering. Her breath caught when a second vulture lunged, but Colt met him with a calculated punch, sending the intruder sprawling. Colt's leather jacket gleamed wet under the flickering fluorescent light, his movements fluid, precise, almost artistic in their lethal efficiency. "Marcy, the envelope." Colt barked over the storm of noise. She moved swiftly, sliding it into the safety of the Waitress station drawer, fingers shaking but determined. It was the one thing that could give him leverage, the one thing the vultures hadn't counted on. Another vulture swung a chair from behind, aiming for Colt's head. He ducked, spinning, and delivered a crushing knee that sent the man staggering backward into the wall. The floor trembled as if it were alive, responding to the intensity of the fight. Through it all, Colt never lost focus on Marcy. He had fought countless battles, but this was different. This was protection, raw and absolute. Every movement, every strike, was choreographed to ensure she remained untouched. He was not just fighting to survive, he was fighting to save a life that had no reason to trust a stranger, yet already did. The stranger attempted to escape in the confusion, crawling toward the exit. Colt's eyes locked on him, and in a heartbeat, he was there, grabbing the man's collar and yanking him back. "You're not going anywhere." Colt growled, the sound vibrating through the diner like thunder. Outside, the remaining vultures tried to force their way in. Colt pivoted, blocking the door with sheer force, muscles straining, eyes locked on their every move. One by one, they realized they were not facing just a man, they were facing a storm contained in human form. Every attempt to breach the diner was met with precise, unyielding resistance. Marcy watched, terrified yet mesmerized, as Colt moved with a terrifying grace. Rain dripped from his hair, leather-soaked, fists bruised, yet his resolve never faltered. Each vulture who dared enter the diner was neutralized, pushed back, or left stunned, unable to comprehend the intensity of the force they were facing. Finally, the last of them hesitated at the threshold. Colt's eyes, dark and unflinching, locked onto them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rain pounding against the windows and the occasional crash from the chaos earlier. "You want it," Colt said, voice low but lethal. "Come get it. But remember this, the envelope, the truth, the life inside this diner, is under my protection. Step forward, and you're done." One by one, the remaining intruders backed away, unwilling to test the resolve, unwilling to cross the line Colt had drawn. The storm outside seemed to bow to the storm within, as if nature itself recognized the battle had been decided. Colt turned back to Marcy, breathing hard, jacket torn and soaked, bruises forming on his knuckles, yet unbroken in spirit. "It's over, for now," he said, voice rough but calm. "You're safe." Marcy exhaled, tears slipping down her cheeks, relief flooding her chest. I didn't think anyone could save," her words faltered, but the gratitude was clear. Colt gave her a faint, tired smile. "You saved yourself too," he said. "By staying quiet, by staying alive, by trusting that someone would fight for you." The diner was wrecked, neon lights flickering, rain pouring through the cracked doorway, yet inside, a strange sense of calm descended. The storm had broken, leaving silence and safety in its wake. Marcy realized, for the first time that night, that courage wasn't just in the fight. It was in surviving, in trusting, and in standing firm when the world demanded silence. And Colt was more than a warrior. He was a protector, a moral force, a man who made the dangerous world bend to the safety of the innocent. The storm finally subsided outside, leaving puddles that reflected the shattered neon lights of the diner. The chaos of the night was behind them, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. Colt Ironjaw Hayes leaned against the counter, dripping wet, bruised, yet unbroken. Marcy Blake stepped forward, exhausted but alive, the envelope safely tucked away. Colt's eyes softened as he studied her. "You did well," he said, voice low but sincere. "You stayed calm, stayed alive, and trusted me. That takes more courage than fighting off a dozen men." Marcy shook her head, voice trembling. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let him get hurt." Colt gave a faint, wry smile. "You saved me tonight too. Most people wouldn't step up, but you did. That's why people like us fight, not for pride, not for revenge, but to protect those who can't protect themselves." The stranger, finally subdued and waiting outside with the police Colt had called, was led away. His arrogance and threats were gone, replaced with fear and humiliation. Marcy watched silently, realizing that justice didn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looked like survival, protection, and moral clarity. Colt turned to her one last time. "Remember this, sometimes the world asks you to stay quiet, to watch, to survive. But when someone steps up, when someone chooses courage over fear, everything changes." Marcy nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. That night, she had witnessed bravery, loyalty, and the unyielding force of moral strength firsthand. Colt and his crew weren't just bikers, they were guardians, living examples that the right choice could change lives. She looked at the envelope one last time. "So, what now?" Colt's gaze was steady, reassuring. "Now, we heal. Now, we live. And if the world ever tries to take what's yours, remember, you have people who will stand for you, no questions asked." The rain had stopped. The neon flickered one last time before stabilizing, casting soft light across the diner's interior. Colt's shadow stretched long across the floor, a silent promise. Marcy understood, life would continue, storms would return, but courage, loyalty, and moral strength would always endure. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness, it's survival. Courage isn't only fighting, it's trusting the right person when danger strikes. Loyalty can protect more than strength alone ever could. Moral choices define the battlefield of life, often more than violence does. And when the world seems darkest, standing for the innocent can light the path for everyone.